We're going to look at using this watt-o-meter from AliExpress to allow us to measure our electric usage. It's got a relatively simple wiring setup. You've got AC in on these two pins and AC out on these two pins. There doesn't seem to be any polarity noted, so we're going to assume that it doesn't matter which side is live and which side is neutral. We'll use a extension cable, just a standard 4-pin 4-gang extension cable for our wiring. So our plug will be our coming in from the input side, and we will use this for our output. So the first thing we want to do is actually take our cable and cut this in half. So I've just marked the center point of my cable. I'm going to use some scissors to cut this and some wire strippers to take off the core wires. So we'll try this just with some scissors. Hopefully it goes through quite nicely. And then you can see on the inside I've got my, let's get that in focus. I've got my 3 wires there. So I've got the brown, the blue, and the greeny yellow earth cable. We're just going to use a box cutter to remove the outer layer to get to our 3 AC lines. One way to do this is to make a slit down the side here, and then peel it off almost like a banana and cut around the rest of the wire. So let's just have a go at doing that. I want to take about 1 centimeter or so off. And that should have done the trick. And once we have our outer layer slit down the middle, we can just take these 3 wires, take them in our hand, and using a pair of scissors just cut off the remaining parts of the outer layer of protection. And then we'll just use some wire strippers to strip off our AC wires. I want to take off about 10 mil from each wire. And lastly, the neutral wire. And there we go. So now we have our 3 lines with the copper exposed, so we can now start inserting them into our watt module. One of the things to be really careful of when you are taking off this outer sleeve is to make sure you don't cut so deep that you go into the wires you were trying to expose. And as you can see, I have gone way too far and cut into my live wire, and you can see it's actually coming out now. Unfortunately, if you leave this as is and this moves, the slit will just get bigger and bigger because of the tension on the wire. So the only real remedy for this is to peel back a bit more of this white layer and then do a clean cut on the on the live wire where the slit just about ends. And you can see, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but the slit is pretty deep, so it ends about there-ish. Do a clean cut, and then again just strip the wire again. You'd also probably need to do the exact same thing with the neutral and the earth, not because they've got the same problem as the live, but just because you want these three wires to have approximately the same length. So I will fix this now. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just widen, take a bit more off this protective layer, take a bit more of that off, and then I'm just going to find exactly where this slit, you can see the slit, if you leave it, it will start making, just get that in focus, it will start making an impression on the wire before it actually breaks. So right around here is probably a good place just to start afresh. So I'm going to take that and there. And so I want to make sure that my other two cables, they match the length, and just tidy this up by removing a bit more of that outer layer. Cool, now we have both sides stripped and ready to be connected to our watt meter module. We'll do that next. Now the first thing to note is that the module doesn't have an earth connection, so I need to reconnect my two earth wires. I'm going to resolder these back together. So in future I would think about trying to preserve this cable without actually going through the process of cutting it and then resoldering it back together again. It would make removing the outer layer slightly harder, as opposed to just cutting through it and then stripping it. However, I think that would be worth it for this, just for the simple fact that you don't have to then resolder wires together. So wherever you can save yourself some work, you should. But that's a small issue. The next thing to think about is how to actually connect these cables into the module. Now you could just go ahead using the reference diagram, use your connections inside there, and that is what we will do. However, the thing to keep in mind is that you don't want these cables just to go in and left there without any kind of support, because if this moves, then so will the cable. If you end up moving the wire or you end up moving the extension, then the cable has the potential at this point to flex inside the connection, and that could become loose. When you're dealing with AC electricity, 240 volts, the last thing you really want to do is take any kind of chances. So unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be as simple as just screwing these in using the screw terminals. I want to think about how to relieve any kind of stress that could potentially occur on these cables to loosen them out of their connection. I've got my earth wire soldered back together there. I've used some electrical tape just to insulate the connection, and now I want to attach my two cables to the module to provide some cable relief. I'm going to try this with some hot glue and see how it goes, and if I feel that the connection isn't stable, I will use something else. I'm just going to go ahead and stick these two cables down. That looks relatively secure. I'm going to add a few more drops of glue just around here, because this will be the main part where the cable is going to flex. So this part here in particular you want to have as strong as possible, so I will add a bit more glue on that side. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry, and once that's all dried and I can get that cleaned up, I can do the next step, which will be to connect my wires into the module and actually give this meter a test. I went ahead and added a few more layers of glue just to really shore up the connection. I wasn't sure that just having a single layer underneath was going to be enough, so I've just gone over the top of the wire and added an additional bit of glue. I will eventually have this in an enclosure where I can have something mechanical holding these ends onto the enclosure, and therefore the chemical bond won't be necessary, but I think it's good at the moment while I'm testing just to have this on here, just to make sure that these don't wiggle around to cause any stress on our connections there. So when I move this, at the moment it's looking pretty solid, which is what I was looking for. So last bit before I can actually give this a test is to take my wires and screw them into the terminal. So this part here is the load, so that's going to be the out of my cable, so that's going to be these cables here, and the inner ones are going to be my AC in, which are going to be these cables here with the input. So this is actually going to go to, the input's going to go to the plug, and the output is going to go to the gangs on the extension cable. So I'm just going to go ahead and wire that in. So the module is wired up. I've used the screw connectors there to get the wires to hold. You want to make sure that you don't have any protruding wire strands. It's quite important to try and get it as flush as possible inside the screw terminals. I will now give the module a test run to see if it's picking up the measurements that it's supposed to. So just before I do test this module, I just want to make sure that my earth connection is solid. So I did have to resolder my earth connection when I cut the cable. If I was doing this again, I would very much try and avoid cutting the earth cable in the first place. But now that I have and resoldered it back together again, I want to make sure that my earth connections on my sockets, I've got 4 of these. I want to make sure that my earth connections on my socket is connected correctly to the earth socket on the plug. Now, if one of these works, then the actual connection is fine. If one of them works and one of them fails, then there might actually be a problem with the socket itself, and therefore I'd have to take this apart and have a look. The way I'm going to check if the earth connection is working correctly is to use my multimeter. I'm going to do a continuity test. I don't have the little beeping thing that you sometimes get on multimeters, where if you want to do continuity you will get a little beeping sound. So what I'm going to do is set my resistance to 200 ohms when there's no connection between, there's no electrical connections between the probes. I'll get a 1 symbol, or I won't get any kind of reading on my multimeter. If there is a connection, I will get some form of reading to show that there's resistance between the 2 points, meaning that there is a connection between the 2 points. So I'm gonna, hopefully I can get this all on camera. I'm gonna keep this down here. I'll put one part of my probe into the earth socket, and I'll put the second part on the earth connection on the plug, and you can see that it's reading a connection. So all I'm going to do now is go ahead and check the rest of these and make sure that I get a reading for each of the sockets. I've plugged in a LED lamp onto my 4-gang extension to give this a test. I've also plugged in the plug into my socket over here, and you can see that it's reading 242 volts, no current, no watts, no power is going through. So I can give this a test now. The LED lamp is rated at 4.9 watts, so I should get a reading of about 4.9 or a bit higher. So I'll go ahead and turn this on just to give this a check. You can see the light come on the side, and you can see that I've got the current reading, I've got the power, which is slightly higher, so maybe that LED light bulb is slightly higher, maybe it might be around the 5.9 watts, and my voltage stays the same. So now that I know this works on a relatively low power, on a low power appliance, I can check this on something slightly higher. So the module has now been connected to my main computer supply, so this is now measuring my computer with both of the monitors off. It's also got other few bits and bobs that are attached to the extension, so that includes the router. I'm just going to do a few test measurements just to see how much power different things take. So I'll try turning on the monitor. So at the moment, as you can see, the computer not doing much. It's taking about 34 watts. So if I turn on the first monitor, it will, so the monitor's come on, it's jumped up to about 50 watts. So it's now gone up by about 20. And let's see what happens when I turn on the second monitor. Yep, it shot up again. So it's around 66, stable about 66. And again, the computer's not doing anything at the moment. It would be very interesting to see how much power gets taken when different things are running. I will try doing some rendering maybe in Fusion. I will also test this when the computer's hibernating versus the computer sleeping, and I'll put those results up on the video. But the monitor itself seems pretty accurate. Thanks for watching. See you next time.